Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Phil and Dave for not another spoiler discussion. The first Star Wars spoiler discussion since The Mandalorian, of course, parts 1 and part 2 of Ahsoka, which is now streaming on Disney Plus, and we are here to go through the first 2 episodes, give our thoughts on it. And firstly, apologies we are a bit late. There's been a lot of technical difficulties. The backgrounds weren't working as well, which is very strange. That happened as we pressed go live. So the timing has worked out there. But as always, we're going to go through these 2 episodes. We're going to give our thoughts on the big moments, maybe do a bit of theorizing, some predictions of what we think is going to happen in the coming weeks, because we're a quarter of the way through the Ahsoka series and it's August the 23rd. And this is the first Star Wars video on the channel, I think, since the Mandalorian Season 3 finale, which I was ill, so I missed that one. So, yeah, it's nice to be back talking Star Wars. It's a very busy time on the channel. There's a lot of things happening. We've got loads of new series starting up. We're heading into Oscar season. We've got a David Fincher retrospective starting from next week. So things have been moving. Things have been very busy. And as always, we do want to hear from everybody below. So please do comment with your thoughts on Ahsoka. If you like the series, if you haven't liked the series, let us know your thoughts on those first 2 episodes. And if you are curious about more, you can, of course, hit the subscribe button. We will be going live every Wednesday evening for this, like we have done with a lot of our other series this year. So aside from that, if you also want to follow us on social media, it's where we announce videos, where we talk about a lot of other stuff. You can get us on linktree.com/cinemasavvy. All our links to all our social media accounts are on there. So you can just get the link for that. And aside from this, if you want to find out a little bit more, we've also got a link to our store in Redbubble, which is in the description below. So a lot of stuff happening. It's been very busy. Thank you all for your patience and for everyone coming back to us. But I guess in the comments, we've got Sam who's watching. We've got a hello there. Lovely to see you, Sam, as always. We will be getting Sam on one of these streams eventually as well. But kind of following through with that, I guess the best way to kickstart this is going to be talking to everybody about, I guess, Ahsoka. So if we keep this fairly quick, I don't want, not in a rude way, not your background with Ahsoka, because we all know it goes back to the Clone Wars, but just everyone's thoughts heading into this series, maybe like from when it was announced through to, I don't know, the Planet Celebration, because we were all on the streaming stage for it. Just, Phil, if we go to you first, just have you been hyped for this? Like, what's the background with you for it?
I have been very hyped for this. So actually, funny enough, I've rewatched the entirety of Rebels twice this year already, and I finished my last rewatch a couple of days ago, and it all in hype, all building up for this. And as soon as Ahsoka was announced, I was kind of unsure as to what story they were going to tell, kind of what era where she was. We had obviously that little snippet in Mando, but then leading up to it, we heard more and more, a bit more casting and a bit more. Okay, maybe Rebels season 5, maybe this is why Rebels was cut to season 4, kind of thing. And then we got to Celebration, of course. So we're lucky enough when we all went, we got the Celebration stage for the Lucasfilm showcase. So of course we were able to sit there and watch the trailer on the biggest screen with the biggest sound. And yeah, I mean, I was hyped going into it, and then obviously last night going, do I stay up? Do I wake up early? What do I do? But yes, no, very excited for it. And either way, very, very happy to sit here and chat about it going forward.
Absolutely. And just a very quick one. We've just lost Dave on technical difficulties. So as soon as he's back, we'll get him back into this as well. But yeah, kind of the same review that obviously, I mean, I put it in the spoiler-free review that to me, it was always inevitable we're going to get Ahsoka as a series. Even before her coming Mandalorian, I think we all knew it was going to happen at some point. The moment Dave Filoni starts doing live action directing, going back to the Mandalorian pilot. It wasn't really a pilot, but the first episode, I guess. It's one of them where I think it was always going to happen at some point. And the question was always, is it going to be a film? Is it going to be a TV series? And obviously we've ended up with a TV series. And now we know that there is going to be a film down the line, not necessarily for Ahsoka, but we can all assume that she'll be involved somewhat, as will a certain Grand Admiral who we'll talk about as well later on. So it's one of them where, again, you know, I wasn't massively hyped heading into this. And I kind of said this, I'm just repeating what I said on Tuesday's video, but obviously with all the strikes at the moment, and I actually want to talk about this very briefly. Phil, I know you've worked in the industry as well, so you're familiar with this.
Yeah.
A lot of the Star Wars podcasters, American ones, some British ones, are choosing not to cover the show. standing with support with the people on strike, which I fully, massively respect. And it is something where everyone is allowed to do that. There is no right or wrong way. It's about showing support for that. And of course, no one wants to promote struck companies, especially that directly affects them and the people that work on those sorts of channels. So fully up with everyone that's been doing that. We are continuing to do our weekly spoiler discussions. A lot of other videos and channels will be as well. But it is one of them where there is no wrong answer. So there are people who don't go out attacking your favorite podcasters for not doing certain things. It's absolutely fine what they're doing. And kind of blending that into this, because there hasn't been any cast, because there's not been any promo aside from Star Wars Celebration, it's one of those where things have been very different in the mindset of, because there's been a marketing machine, mainly the same clips, the same posters. We've not had junkets. We've not had the cast talking. Officially, the marketing for this was essentially Star Wars Celebration, which was over 4 months ago now, which really, really feels a lot shorter than it was. So it's one of them where, and this is weird for me to say, I think it's not benefited the series that it's really unfortunate like cast can't promote what they've worked on, and again fully with them on strike, and they've all spoke about it. Disney is one of the big three studios that is reasoning for everyone being on strike. Boyga's somehow made himself look worse than David Zaslav over the last month or two. It's one of them where, because there's not been buzz around this aside from the Star Wars fan base, I actually think for me that's made it better entering this project, that you're not having the normal utopia, you're not having the normal junkets where certain questions are asked for certain responses to get people going. It's been fairly quiet heading into the show, and kind of with Monday's screening, we were lucky to be at the fan event at the BFI IMAX. So I was invited both as press and through the RT Builders Club. So I got sort of double entry, which was lovely. Means that someone likes me somewhere. And it was one of those where there weren't, many influences as we expected there would be. A lot of it was the fan groups, the Builders Club, the Garrison, the Mando Mercs, the charity groups. A lot of press were there as well. So it was really interesting for me, at least, that the marketing campaign for this has been very different. And obviously, we know this is probably the first major release since Barbenheimer, if we can even count this as a major release. It's not a film, but there hasn't been a big promotional tour, and this has been the next big thing to come out. So it's really interesting heading into this. It's been very different compared to other Star Wars releases. Yeah, I mean, listen, watching it on the big screen, I know I'm very lucky I got to watch this, not just at the cinema, the BFI IMAX. It's where us three watched Episode 9 together as well. It is my favorite cinema in the country. I saw Oppenheimer there. I'm still surprised they took Oppenheimer out for one evening to do the premiere, only because it's still selling out every screening there, which is ridiculous. But Dave, lovely to have you back with us. Just very quickly, thoughts heading into Ahsoka? I did a very long-winded version of it.
That's all right. No, it's lovely. Fine. So sorry for being quite so professional at the start there and bringing down the podcast. But yeah, technology, what a wonderful thing. My thoughts for Ahsoka, I'm a massive Rebels fan, so I really enjoyed that going in. And for the position of obviously what we knew was going to be happening, that this is basically going to be the next series of Rebels, and I think we'll probably get into that more as we speak, as how much that seems to be the case. I was really excited for it. I've loved seeing Rosario as Ahsoka. I enjoyed her appearance in The Mandalorian, and her appearance in the Book of Boba Fett Mandalorian episode. So yeah, I was hyped for the show. I have been for a while. I was devastated when they moved the time slot to 2 a.m, but 2 a.m. it had to be after I'd thought, no, I'll watch it the next morning. Couldn't do that, so got up at 2 o'clock to watch it. So yeah, it was just nice to be back in that world, and I will probably get into it later, but a much more cinematic looking world than we've had, I think, previously. Certainly in my eyes of what I see, with the way I watched it, it certainly looks different to the way Mando and things have looked being shot as they have been. But yeah, overly hyped, and I couldn't wait to see it, and was not disappointed.
No, absolutely, and that's a really good place to start. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about, we've got part 1 and part 2. We're going to go through the big moments, because we'd be here forever if we were doing it like scene by scene. But I'm going to kick. So you mentioned cinematic, Dave. I sent a tweet out, and I've been thinking this since I watched it on Monday. I got real Phantom Menace vibes watching this at the cinema. And I said that about the Acolyte trailer, so I know I've now said that for 2 projects. Also, Edith Bowman did the introduction for the series, and she goes, the usual, we've got the Star Wars fans here. Are you ready for a sneak peek at something exciting? And I just snapped like, are we going to get the Acolyte trailer? Obviously, we didn't. We were given Loki, and then the creator, which does look fantastic. Also directed by Gareth Edwards, who worked on Rogue One. Yes, the Acolytes. One day they'll release that trailer for us to get to see it.
I am waiting for this day with bated breath. You know I am.
It was the best trailer. The best trailer from that day. What a day!
Oh hell yeah!
Talking cinematically, so I made a Phantom Menace comparison, and the Phantom Menace doesn't do this, but I was sold on this show inside the first 20 seconds. The moment we got, well, firstly they ditched the terrible Star Wars music intro. That's just me being a snob. To me, Star Wars is introed by the 20th Century Fox fanfare. I've never liked the Disney Plus helmety things. It's fine. It's just me being me. But when that starts and we're getting an actual the score, we're getting Kevin Kiner's score immediately. I was like, oh, okay, things are going to be a bit different. And then it was unleashed upon us. The Red Crawl. Not this might sound like a criticism, though it's not. My favorite scene of the entire 2 episodes is the Red Crawl, because suddenly, and this isn't a criticism of Solo, this isn't a criticism of Rogue One or the other Disney Plus shows. I was at the cinema, yes, I know that. I felt like I'm watching Star Wars now, and I don't think I've had that with the other shows. Yes, okay, I've been at home, and I was lucky to see that the first week at the cinema, but it's always felt like we're watching a series. This felt like we're in the end game now. Grand Admiral Thrawn in full caps. They're plotting. Things are going in motion. Yes, it's the first episode of 8. Yes, there's going to be other series and then a film. But I just suddenly felt like there were stakes in play because there was a crawl. And I just want to ask you both, because I wasn't spoiling anything. That was something I didn't want to tell anyone. I hinted at it on the spoiler-free video. I was like, something amazing happens in the first 5 minutes. But what did you both think about that crawl before it even then gets to the very Phantom Menace-esque opening?
I mean, for me, so part of the other thing I was going to say when I'm doing the build-up was I've been listening to the Thrawn books, and I've just got to the last one in terms of Lesser Evil of the second trilogy. So I'm properly in the mode for Thrawn, but also for Rebels. I've been watching both, so it's kind of cool to have it all come to this one point. The Crawl is something that is so quintessentially Star Wars. It is that very... Everyone remembers their first time watching it, and everyone knows it's such a trademark. If Star Wars, there are certain pieces here and there that makes it what it is. I mean, I remember watching episode 7 for the first time. I didn't feel it was Star Wars until we were on a desert planet when you saw Rey going with the speeder. There was like, okay, now I'm watching Star Wars, let alone the opening crawl. But yeah, seeing it in red gave me very Clone Wars Season 7 vibes, which, considering it's Ahsoka, isn't a bad thing. And yeah, no, it was goosebumps. As soon as it came on, the biggest grin on my face that I could manage at 8 o'clock in the morning with a cup of coffee. Like, it was just, okay, this is happening. And it was just, yeah, let's go.
It's been nice. I mean, Solo almost tried to give us a crawl, but like, it was as if they'd been told no crawl for your movie. So they're like, well, we'll put it on screen in a different way. And this is kind of the first time they've got even closer to giving us a full-on scroll back. Like, well, we're going to have text. It's going to come up the screen. It's set in the paragraphs. We're going to have the writing exactly. Some words are going to be capitalized. You're going to know what's important in this. And it was lovely to have it back. You're right. Like Phil just said, quintessential Star Wars. That is what you expect at the beginning. And I missed that on things like Rogue One and Solo to a point where I thought, yes, I guess they were like, oh, these aren't your main saga, so we'll not have the same crawl. Personally, put it on front of everything for me. The start of a TV show, put it on the first episode. You don't need one every episode. First episode, sure, have an opening crawl, because I think you can do so much. Well, again, I've said this a few times, but we'll probably get this more of how much, if you have seen Rebels, you are going to get out of this show. As to people who are coming in who have seen all the live action stuff, for them, a crawl is a really handy thing to have at the beginning to kind of put them in a place, a time. This is who we're dealing with. This is where we are. And now we're into your story. You don't kind of need to know the rest. But I just feel for people who hadn't come to seeing Rebels, it might be a very different experience as well.
Yes. And speaking of that, Sam in the comments hasn't seen Rebels. He's seen a lot of clips from it and he knows the gist of it. But he did a tweet earlier. I will be watching this with my dad at some point over the next week. He has not seen Rebels. There's no way he'll watch the animated series. It's just a generational thing, I think, for him. And also, I'm not going to tell him, like, you got to watch 4 seasons of this show to then watch 1 season of
the funny thing is,
but then to watch Rebels, you need to watch Clone Wars.
The funny thing is, though, I actually had the same conversation with my dad. Obviously, George, you and I do the same thing, sitting down watching the shows with them, and we were talking about Ahsoka because we just finished up Andor not that long ago. We're going to be watching Mando soon. He's just a little bit behind. And we're talking about Ahsoka because we watched with Mando with Ahsoka popping up. And okay, so who's his character? Explain a little bit. And I said, well, Ahsoka's going to be basically Rebels season 5. Went, okay, so I started watching Rebels with you. Didn't quite gel with the animation, but I think we're going to have to finish it now. Like, he is properly hooked. So I've given him the Cliff Notes version in terms of the background, so he knows a little bit what's coming up. But it will be interesting. But I do agree, it's a generational thing a little bit when it comes to animation versus the kind of the live action stuff.
Yeah, and also the main thing Lucasfilm needs to know, which is I think they do, because I think it's the purpose of having a crawl. Not the general audience who we are Star Wars fans will watch everything that they're going to release. The general audience who, again, why has Barbie made $1 billion and well over $1 billion? Because the general audience turned up, not because Barbie fans turned up. You know, and that's the key that these companies keep forgetting and then they're missing with marketing and so many things. The general audience are the ones that are the keys. And I even like the fact that it doesn't assume you've watched The Mandalorian. It doesn't say, this character was in The Mandalorian and now she's taken prison. It was Morgan Elsbeth has been captured. Brilliant. We know the context of that because we watched season 2 of The Mandalorian. People that might not have seen that might not. And there are going to be viewers here, regardless of what people think and what people might say about jumping in and out at certain points in time. There will be people that watch this that haven't watched The Mandalorian. There might be less, but having that crawl in there's a great way to get it going. And let's be honest, down the line, I'm not speculating. When we get to the Heir to the Empire film, we know they're going to call it that. I'm just going to keep calling it that. I guarantee there'll be like a Disney Plus section, right? And it'll be like, everything to watch, you got to watch first. I wouldn't be surprised if this now kickstarts it. Not to dismiss the first 3 seasons of The Mandalorian at all, or Book of Boba Fett. I just think there's a sense of finality that we're moving in now with. And this is going to be the key, this jumpstart for a lot of people, which I'm very curious about. Again, what's going to happen later in the series, what's going to happen later with the studio. And for people curious about release dates, ignore everything we were told in April about release dates with the strikes. Anything you thought was a release date is certainly not going to be happening in the near future. So just best to wait until they resolve themselves. That's what's best for the industry. That's what they need. Studios got to sort this out. And then, then you can daydream about Star Wars. But there are more important things in motion at the moment than Star Wars films. And I just want to say that because it's very tricky talking this series and the industry at the moment. It's been a very weird summer. But we've got a quick comment by Palavori. I didn't see Rebels or Clone Wars. I read a short synopsis. I think it was enough. Yeah. I've got a friend. He watched all of Rebels. He hadn't seen it before. Now he's ready for Ahsoka. And again, I'll use my dad as the test tube because I think it'll be fine. I think it honestly will be. And obviously we've seen 2 episodes, not 8. And we'll talk about Sabine and Hera later on as well when we start bringing in a couple of these familiar faces. But I just want to keep talking about the intro. I want to talk about the prologue, which was the amazing, I guess we can say, introduction of 2 new Star Wars characters. Ones we've been looking forward to seeing. We've got Baylan Skoll, played by Ray Stevenson, tragically passed away between Celebration and now. Lovely tribute at the end of the episode to him from the production. I think that caught a lot of people off guard with what happened. And they had, obviously, a Celebration, had him on the panel. He's really excited. He's done animated work on Clone Wars. He's been in so many things. So it's always quite weird watching stuff posthumous from actors. And I just as a gist, I really enjoyed him in the first 2 episodes. We'll talk about it in a bit more detail. And we've also got Shin Hati, played by Ivana Sagno, who a lot of people are talking about. And I'm just going to say, there is the Phantom Menace comparisons are beginning now. We almost has. I thought, oh no, is Dave Filoni going to do the whole Star Destroyer from episode 4? And then actually end up being like a reversible Phantom Menace, where it's like, rather than having the 2 Jedi come on board for negotiations, I love that they're not Sith, but they're mercenaries. They're not the good guys. They've got the Force, something we haven't seen a lot of in this post episode 6 world so far. Not as in between 6 and 7, not obviously past 7, but a really good setup opening, gets Morgan Elsbeth out of prison, introduces some new villains for us, sets the whole series on its way, because we know it's about Ahsoka and we know we're going to get to an expert. Just very quickly, thoughts from both of you on the opening, because what I will say, and this is what I love that the Star Wars shows have done, almost the entirety of the marketing footage has now been dropped in the first 2 episodes, which gives us back to that path of we've seen a lot of what's been shown to us now, which means there's going to be some insane surprises to come.
Yeah, I mean, that's become standard practice for the Disney Plus shows, especially when it comes to Star Wars. Here's your trailer dump, which is your first couple episodes. But I like that because it leaves a lot on the table compared to some of the older trailers that kind of went, here you go, here's kind of the entire story in 2 minutes, you don't need to see the film, which I felt ruined a lot of the suspense, whereas this has got a lot more building clues and pleasant surprises, which I'm going to come to later on. George, you and I have already talked about before we came on. The intro. I mean, it is, again, fair enough, going back to that whole quintessential Star Wars. I love the comparison between it and Phantom Menace because, again, some of the negotiations, it's very much that here we are, here's your prison break, but it's not a dragged out kind of feature. It's a very much a here's your intro, here's your characters, here's what they're doing, bish, bash, bosh, done. Not in a rushed way. It was a very kind of short intro to what the show is and what's going to be and what they're there for. It's a very much a quick, gets you in. For those who haven't seen Rebels, it almost lets you know you don't have to have seen it to understand what's about to happen. Same for Mando. So again, I love it. Was short, it was punchy, but it was to the point. But it was also kind of moving things forward. You have little references. You have Home One being mentioned, of course, and you get Akbar. You have so much. There's nostalgia without fan service. It's Filoni basically at his best. And what I like is Filoni has come out and said he has written every single episode of this series because no one knows the characters better, which for me was kind of the biggest stamp of this is going to be good without having watched a single second. Because if Filoni is taking charge, you know he's taking care of it. It's why we're going to get on to Sabine later on. I'm okay with what's going on because I trust Filoni in the process, but there's also bits I'm not entirely sold on, but we'll get to all that. And I know some is a point of contention, but yeah, the intro, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It did harken back for me, especially, as I said, there was lovely Phantom Menace vibes to that, the two Jedi arriving, but also like flashes to A New Hope, the bright start white hallway, rebels getting shot down, red lightsaber going through those the soldiers. I just thought it was a really nice reminder of like where we are. This is Star Wars. You've seen like the costumes and things, even just the rebel pilots who are not the rebel pilots, the commanders who are on there in that grey overall with the blue shirt underneath that was taken. Chris Medine was in that outfit in Return of the Jedi. So it puts you in an exact era, but flashes back and harkens to like, you remember New Hope, remember them coming in and destroying people. This is kind of what you're getting. And it was a really, like Phil said, it was a really nice, quick way to get through the introductions of three characters. Really like this guy, this girl, they're together. This is who they're breaking out. We're into it. And for that, you didn't need to know anything else about anything. You could look at that like when Vader turned up on A New Hope and walked through the Tantive, destroying everyone in his way. It was very much that kind of introduction. And I thought for Bale, I thought it was a really, really strong opening as well. I thought he looked immense. He's just a huge guy when he's walking through. So yeah, I loved the opening. It was a really nice harkening back to both, I think, prequel and original trilogy movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
His
and
presence
kind of through
is like
that
fantastic. Sorry, that sounds great. It's like Baylor's presence was just, it was fantastic.
It's when you get the hood up complete with the beard as well. That just combo just worked really well, and it just. I mean, I know in theory we've seen it before in Star Wars, but it felt like something we've not seen yet. We're familiar with it, and that's how a lot of Star Wars can be, which is what we all enjoy about it. And even then, following through to that, we get the title of Ahsoka full screen. That's the same for Episode 2. That has its own sort of prologue in its own way. Even the introduction of Ahsoka, and this is where like Kevin kind of scored to me starts to come into it. The pacing of the first 2 episodes, I sort of said it's methodical. It's very slow paced. That's not a bad thing. But when you think of the core of this, right, it's this character who is on her own quest. She's searching for Thrawn. It doesn't need to be going at 200 miles per hour. And that's certainly what I felt a takeaway from the introduction of Ahsoka. Again, we've seen the footage in the trailers. We've seen it everywhere, doing the circle trick, exploring somewhere. Just, it felt like Fallen Order, like she goes into this cave, solve the puzzle to get the map to move around with it. And I'm sure somewhere someone's going to moan saying, oh no, not another Star Wars property where they've got to find a map that leads to someone that's been missing. But it's one of them where it really works for me. And the production design so far in the series, I've really enjoyed. And even talking the volume is a really fascinating thing. That it's one of the most incredible pieces of technology that cinema's ever had. and we're talking about it being used on TV, by the way. And it's still in its infancy, so there are going to be teething problems, and it can be noticeably used on sets when sometimes, it could be budget reasons, it could be the cinematographer, it's how it's shot, how it's framed. The Mandalorian has been the best at using it. Greg Fraser, who helped develop the tech, who also used it on the Batman, made it look great there. House of Dragon used it really well. That's literally flying dragons. And there have been instances in some other shows and other productions, companies, whatever, where it has looked terrible, where it has been, this is an excuse to not go out and shoot this on set. So I understand pros and cons against it. For me, it's an incredible piece of technology that people just need to figure out how to use efficiently, like Andor, where it was used in Coruscant so that the reflections from the glass outside would be on the table. That's how you use something like that. Something so unnoticeable, it makes the most sense to actually be able to do it. And certainly in the opening and where these episodes are going to go, I just want to say I thought it looked the best it had. Again, I have the privilege of being at a cinema. But then if you're at a cinema, you're going to notice that stuff a lot more that isn't working because you're on the biggest screen possible for a television budget and actually came from the start saying not formatted for IMAX, which we all obviously knew. So it is one of those where I was not judgmental, but nothing jumped out to me saying this looks terrible, this has been filmed flat. And there are even moments, more so in part 2, where it looks like there's miniatures being used. When they're like building the giant laser beam thing for the hyperdrive. I was like, is that a miniature? Like, I was just looking at the detail, not the forefront, and I was like, is that? It's like Rogue One, right? When you could tell that they had miniatures for the Star Destroyers. There were moments where I just felt like it was coming across like that, and just to get this out of the way. I mean, I'm talking about Ahsoka's opening scene, but the volume looked amazing for what they've used it for, and just full credit to ILM and everyone that's been working on this. And as a sort of backhanded compliment, I will say, Mandalorian season 3, a lot of people haven't liked it, which is fine. A lot of people love it, like myself. I wasn't the biggest fan of the finale, but I will absolutely say that, like Kenobi, that production is a victim of being shot on set during a pandemic. Nothing could be done. No, actors aren't there. And it was a lot more noticeable in season 3 than other seasons. It still looked amazing. It looked incredible. But I felt like with Ahsoka, we've had this jump back in production design. Like, okay, this clearly wasn't shot in a pandemic now, was it? This had everybody available. And for me, it's like Filoni's baby. That this is his Star Wars series. We know this is always going to be his, and it was right that it was his, and credit for Lucasfilm for running with him, not just having him be a writer, to be the showrunner. I'm going to say he probably helps pick some of the directors on it. Steph Green, of course, did part 2, which was great, but it just felt like from a production standpoint, things are not looking good again because they didn't look bad in the first place, but I felt a jump up in quality, and you kind of want that from a new technology at the exact same time. I don't know what your thoughts are on that very briefly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, go back to the miniatures. It's when Ahsoka's arriving into the New Republic ship. Again, it looks, like I mentioned, it looks very similar to the Falcon arriving onto the Death Star. It's that kind of vibes. But yeah, no, I agree. The production value didn't dip during the pandemic. It was a victim of just unfortunate circumstances, whereas this feels like, again, as you said, gone back to, we are 3 years removed. We have now gone into a new period where we're back to kind of how things were, and the volume in this, has been used better than it was. You have to, you do bear in mind when you watch things like Kenobi and season 3 of Mando, we go, okay, they couldn't go out as much as they had done. This has now gone back to the wonderful mix like Andor had of, here is on set, here is the volume. Can you tell the difference? Probably not. And that's how it should be used. It should be used as a window, not as a complete tool where everything gets mass used. It's the same thing we had with episode 2 and episode 3 with blue screens of George Lucas pushed the technology of what could be done in terms of, especially using rushes when you used to have to wait for a day for it to be developed before you could even see what you'd done, where he managed to get it to an entire production level where you could be editing that evening. It's that same level of jumping forward. So Lucasfilm's always pushed it. So, yeah, couldn't agree more.
I just thought, it's like I said when my first statement, I guess, when we were talking with the opening, I just thought the whole thing looked much more cinematic. I thought the actual photography of it all looked much better. I just thought the whole thing to me looked like it had been shot. And this is probably a really big compliment. To me, it looked like it had been shot on film. It just had a bit of a grain about the screen, and it looked and felt like I was watching a Star Wars movie, and that's the biggest compliment I can give it to how well it looked.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that, and I think that's what we want. And also, if we know that visually this is going to be, there's going to be a film that stems from this, you want that continuity on how it's shot as well. You don't want 3 different films that look like they've been shot by 3 different people. And I think having Filoni, ending up directing that film down the line is going to help massively too. But sticking with this, let's go a little bit further. Let's talk. We mentioned the return of Ahsoka. We know we're going to get a map that leads to Grand Admiral Thrawn. It's going to need to be deciphered. Re-enter Sabine Wren, played by Natasha Liu Bordozo. I think that's how it's pronounced. Apologies if it's not. Who, again, at the forefront of marketing. People that've seen Rebels will know who, of course, that is. For people that haven't seen Rebels, they might not have a clue who this character is. They've seen her with a lightsaber in a trailer. They've seen her with a gun in the trailer. They've seen her with different haircuts in the trailers. I really enjoyed, just generalizing the 2 episodes, I really enjoyed her performance in this. I think it's very tricky for actors to come on board to play Rosario Dawson. Full credit. At the time, there was a fair amount of criticism when she was cast that it wasn't Ashley Eckstein. Dave, I know me and you've always been that camp that logically, like casting someone in live action is very different to their animated counterparts. I know that in this series, we now know of at least 2 times it has happened, because we got a great cameo from Clancy Brown, which is a really nice little thing. Again, didn't expect it. It didn't need to be a big moment. It didn't matter if you've not watched Rebels. For the people that know that Clancy Brown was a part of Rebels, that is a wonderful little moment. And that's the sort of fan service that people, not to jump on the Marvel sort of bandwagon, but people go in on cameos these days. And I completely agree that sometimes a cameo can disrupt a scene, disrupt a story. But when it's a character that existed in the canon story in this city who has dealings with them all, it just makes sense to say, hey, Clancy Brown, would you like to be in this? Probably on set for a day, shoot a couple of scenes. And I like that they were able to do that. But then you get, the contrast of bringing in Sabine. How do you, replace TSK? And I thought she did a phenomenal job in this. We've got a quick comment. I'm going to bring it by Sam, who's pretty loving Natasha in the Society. She did very well in these 2 episodes. This is the first thing I've actually seen her in. And I've just got to say, I think she immediately made it her own. It's not an impersonation of how she was in an animated series. She has made it her own, as Rosario Dawson has also done. And she's had a few more episodes, of course, with the other shows. But I like how they were able to start bringing the Rebels team into it. I know that Hera, of course, is involved. General Hera Syndulla, which even going back to when Rogue One came out, do you remember that was it was like is it her dad? Is it her? We always assumed it'd be her, but I like that there is that canon continuity now between a very, very, quick voiceover Easter egg in the background to Rogue One, to that also being a part of this. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead, again, coming on board, I thought she did a great job. Playing a Twi'lek is probably one of the trickiest things in Star Wars in terms of like stature, physique, and probably undergoing insane makeup every day. There'll be that makeup for hours. It looked incredible. And I've just got to say, I liked her performance. We don't get a lot from her. I'm sure we'll grow with her a bit more. We'll bring it in. But just these 2 characters making the jumps live action, almost flawless. And again, they're not sitting there saying, hey, you remember when, we had all these battles with all these people? Remember this, remember that? They haven't fallen into the trap of assuming the audience is aware. And that's the thing that this show is really going to need to do. And I know we've not met Thrawn yet, and I'm jumping ahead. Putting him in the crawl immediately as this big bad that you're hearing about, that there are whispers of Thrawn's return, right? That's the trailer quote. I love the fact they're not saying, yeah, we all encountered him a couple of years ago. It didn't end well. Ezra, of course, is going to have shout-outs, but I just think it's a very delicate thing to do to get that right. And I think off the first 2 episodes, they've certainly got that right. But what are both your thoughts on those 2 characters?
I'm going to say, controversially, I think Natasha does a better job as Sabine than Rosario does as Ahsoka. Like, I felt more like the transition has been more kind of natural instantaneously. And that's only from these first couple of episodes. But don't get that twisted, get me wrong. Rosario has done an amazing job with Ahsoka. She's made it her own. It's taken these few episodes from Mando was perfect from the get-go. But I just even more felt like she had the nuances down for Sabine that little bit more. I mean, being a Rebels fan and a Clone Wars fan, I've watched them both intensely over the years, but it's controversially maybe, because I do love Rosario as Ahsoka. I do think that it just clicked perfect from the start, but also what it meant was their chemistry just worked that much better between the pair of them. And we'll talk more about their relationship going forward because it's very interesting. But then, Hera was a big one. We've had the General Synduras of the War Room mentioned. You've had Chopper rolling along. Obviously, the Ghost has cropped up in the Battle of Exegol. You've had little bits here and there, but nothing concrete. And now you've got it. And now you've got it. Even with the green eyes, everything was done subtly and perfectly to the point. And she did do the job, amazingly. And I'm looking forward to seeing more going forward. There's not a lot to say purely because actually, I agree with everything you said. I think it's been nailed. The casting has been perfect from the get-go.
I think, absolutely right. And they both slotted in so well. I thought Natasha was excellent as Sabine. I think, just like you said, it picked up her character traits of that rebellious-natured Mandalorian. I thought it was really well played, the way the almost brattiness of her, that she's had a master who'd left her, that she was now the only rebel left on Lothal. So you got all that from her as well. So I thought it was a really, really nice play. I thought Mary Elizabeth did an amazing job as Hera as well. It was nice to see her. She didn't have a lot. I thought she had some really nice lines as well, especially when she was telling them to open the droid's head before it blew up. That's an episode ahead. Later on, we'll talk about something that happened then. But I just thought she had some really nice character moments. The only person I thought was maybe mishandled was the introduction of Ezra. He's mentioned briefly by Hera in the first, when Thrawn's mentioned an Ezra, and then we see the hologram, but it doesn't kind of give you, if you don't know who that is, I think you're kind of a bit like, oh, who are they talking about? Why is he important? It just felt a bit lacking for Ezra's introduction from the character he's probably going to be in this series, for me.
I'm with you. I think Ezra is going to be the stuff right now at this point in time where if you aren't familiar with the Rebel stuff, then I think it might be the Ezra side of it that struggles, because I don't think it assumes but how do you introduce a character who went missing with Thrawn and who we can't introduce right now, but people need to be aware that they're after this character, and that's one of the trickiest things they'll have as a production, because there is a new audience watching this who, I'm not saying people wouldn't watch the animated series, but you'd imagine there's a core set of the animation fans. But again, when you bring the general audience into it, when it makes the jump to live action, the budgets go up, the expectations go up, the numbers go up of people that need to be watching it, all this sort of stuff. And that's what makes me very curious, is how are we going to handle the Ezra stuff? Loved the little hologram, but again, it's hard to make sense of it, I guess, if you aren't already familiar. We've all got the benefit of that. And that's where the people that have watched Rebels are going to come in handy. I know that Sam will be able to talk in one of the next episodes, but very quickly, he said he loved the music during Sabine's introduction, may have been his favourite scene. And then we've got Madeline saying Natasha is amazing as Sabine. They were spot on. And that's what I found interesting as well. I love it when you get fictional Star Wars music. That sounds like a really weird thing. But, Fallen Orders had the song. Oh, God, I forgot the name of it.
From the Hue.
I really forgot it.
Yeah,
yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
And we've had it, of course, we've got the varying cantinas in the Disney era as well, where Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote one of the songs, didn't he, for Force Awakens? So I love
he
this
did
sort of stuff.
the blues, whereas also then we've had, in Rebels, the introduction of the Imperial March as an actual canon song as well, which is brilliant.
And let's never forget Jedi Rocks, the original.
Exactly. Although one thing I will say, funny enough, just jumping back into it, George, on Ezra, I think Ezra's introduction in this was perfectly Googleable, as in terms of if you've not seen Rebels, that little snippet there is the perfect point to go, who is this character? But it wasn't the ram down your throat, here's the information you need, but it also wasn't too little to leave you confused. It was the right amount, I think, for those who don't know the character to go and look him up without it kind of distracting. So I thought it's a very difficult thing to introduce compared to the other characters, where you're here, it's the hunt for Ezra, so you need to know of him without knowing too much. So I think it was just the right amount.
And kind of in line with what you said there, the moral scene's great when it's very brief. Like, these were 6 Rebel heroes who saved this planet. Here's one of them who's no shade because she's the only one left, kind of. And I think that's, again, if you know what Rebels is, you know what that plaque is. If you don't, you've just been told the background that they're battle victors in theory. And in light of that, Phil, I like what you said there because it's just made me think that as well. The approach to this show, the point of view from Filoni as a showrunner, right? We've called it the hunt for Ezra, the search for Ezra, whatever we've always wanted to call it. The way it's been shown the first 2 episodes, it's the threat. It's we need to stop them finding Thrawn. And I think that is a very conscious choice over... They haven't got the map to search for Ezra. They've got the map because they need to stop them getting to Thrawn. And I think that's actually going to be the smartest way to bring everything full circle. And obviously we're going to hope that they sort of follow up and deliver with that. But it is very interesting that is the sort of approach they have. And kind of sticking with I mean, it feels like we're just going through the characters. Let's talk really the story of these first episodes. Let's talk about the map that leads to Grand Admiral Thrawn. Obviously, it ends up with Sabine. She's got to find it for her. Well, she's got to decode it. She's the only one that can. Again, that stuff makes sense. I did have a moment. I was watching it with Charlie, and when they're deciphering it, she's like, 3 figures, 3 things. I was like, fuck's sake! It's gonna be the bloody Dave, your favorite thing.
The fucking Mortis gods.
If it had been the Mortis gods,
that was
honestly, I would have been doing the video by myself, telling you how wonderful it was.
I know that it's very split in the middle, and I was like, you know what, fair play. They've gone for the Mortis gods on the first episode, and then it obviously wasn't. It was just literally part of the sentence, and that's where Star Wars fans are deranged that we hear one thing and assume the other. But I just had this moment, and I was like, obviously it's Filoni. It would actually have made a lot of sense as well. But obviously leads to the twist in the second episode that, it's actually the Night Sister stuff. But I like the idea of the map. I like that it isn't, it's near Imperial database. R2D2's woke up. I like that there's something hidden in it. There's a hidden meaning. I thought, was this like Thrawn being like overly intellectual again? And it wasn't that. It was actually just the fact that it was just an older technology. But I like where that's put it, that we've got this episode called The Master and the Apprentice. We've also got, I'm trying to remember everyone's names now, Shin Hati, who's been sent out to go get Sabine Wren by Baylan Skoll. There's a clear Master Apprentice vibe there, which I'm enjoying. And it's a great way to start setting the villains up. Also, more Phantom Menace thoughts.
Oh, with the probe droid. Yes.
Well, you had the probe droid over the hill. I was like, okay, I see where we're going. But then even before then, when they're doing the ceremony, you've got the old... broadcast droid from the Phantom Menace that would record the Senate, which I got excited about. But I guess where I'm going with this is just asking all your thoughts. What are your thoughts on to stop Thrawn? We're going to have to get this map and get there first. I think it's fine. I think it makes sense for the story perspective. It's very simplistic storytelling. It's kind of what we need. If you're going to bring in a new audience to these established characters, then you want something which is not necessarily easy to follow. But for the first 2 episodes, it's quite simple of how do we get to unknown territory, never known to anyone. Okay, a map will do. Yes, we're going to find out more details. It might not work the way they think. It might work the way they think, but we're going to get Thrawn.
I think it's sooner already being handled better.
I think we'll have him by the end of episode 4. Yeah, I think he'll be in by the end of episode 4 if he's not in by the end of episode 3.
Yeah.
I know there's 8 episodes. I could be massively wrong. I'm not just theorizing, but just both your thoughts on the map and that being the key story point of the first 2.
So yeah, I think they've handled this map better than they handled the map for Luke in episode 7. I think this has already been a better way of doing it and a better way of laying it out. And people will make those comparisons. They'll look at what happened in 7 versus what happened here. Luke didn't want to be found. Thrawn wants to be found. There is a difference. And Thrawn is going to have all of his fail-safes and his plans because, he's overly too intelligent for his own good. And I think this is the best way to handle it, again, without having to go, oh, you guys know of the Purgil, right? They took him away, so we're following the Purgil. Without following the Purgil. But when you then look at the map when it gets brought up later on, you see the Purgil around it. So for those fans who know, they know. And if you don't know, you don't need to know. It's a very simple, straightforward. It's Filoni taking Lucas's best lessons, I think, in this, of assumed knowledge and also unassumed knowledge and blending the two together seamlessly.
And what I really loved about the map, it's great, and obviously it's a great purpose just to get through the story. It's been used many times, as we know, throughout Star Wars to find somebody like this. what I did love about it is it didn't just give us we're going to unknown regions. They give us a brand new galaxy, not just a planet on the outer rim of the planets we know. This is a whole unexplored galaxy. So not only now have they got the worlds we know, maybe in world in between those worlds, we'll get that later. There's that whole new galaxy is now them entering a way of going. Now we've got a whole galaxy of other planets with other life forms and other stories to tell, and they don't just have to be around these worlds anymore. We now know there's a separate galaxy that we can go to.
And that we'll know to differentiate because it will just say in a galaxy far away, not far, far away moving forward. But a quick comment by Bavori. This is a great one for someone that's not watched Rebels. What I got from episode 1 was we have a group of people that fought against the Empire. One important person is missing and is somehow at the same location as the big bad. If you've took that away from it, then that's great. And that shows they're doing something right, and that is the essence of the story. And I kind of love what you said there, Dave, that the fact it is another galaxy. And I know if anyone's played the Fallen Order game sequel, I won't go into that, but they very much get to explore something similar that looked like this in the second part 2, which we'll get to shortly. But before we start talking part 2, just because I know we're going 45 minutes, I really want to quickly talk about the ending. I don't feel like I'm jumping ahead too far by getting into this, but bringing the duel in on episode 1, we know that, again, I'm going to learn everyone's names. Shin Hati, she's after Sabine. She's got the robot droids. The fact we got a duel, I did not expect that this early in the series, which is great because it shows that, and this is what I love that some people I think struggle with, is that between, I need to be careful how I phrase this, characters should just not be the same person in between films, in between shows. I'm not going to make obvious Last Jedi comments because I appreciate some people don't like what they did with Luke to them, etc., etc., etc. But there should always be growth in a character. And I'm trying to think, we last saw Sabine, just before, I guess in theory, episode 4. And like The Mandalorian, this is 4 years after Return of the Jedi? Or is it 7?
7.
Somewhere
7.
Around there, yeah.
So in 7 years, in theory, she can't just be the exact same person as when we left her. It's fine being on the same planet. I know we had the great epilogue, the search for Ezra, which is the ending of this episode 2. It's one of those where I'm glad that something happened with her and Ahsoka that didn't work out in between seasons. That there was an attempt to imagine an apprentice. That the idea that yes, she's not a Force user, but she's training as an apprentice. There's parallels there that I'm curious that I think they're going to explore. But the duel caught me off guard. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm just harping on the sequel trilogy. This is a compliment to how great episode 7 is. Do you remember the old Kylo Ren can't lose to a woman who's had a lightsaber for a day? Do you remember those arguments?
Don't know what you're talking about. No, never heard that at all.
Part of me was like, I don't know if I'm somewhat, in love with this villain. Because let's be honest, we all love a new villain. And Shin Hati's like one of the most exciting new villains I've seen in a long time in Star Wars, since Kylo Ren. Since Ben Mendelsohn, I'll be honest. And there was just something about it. I was like, she's going to obliterate like Sabine. Like this shouldn't be a fair fight. But at the end of the day, there's 2 apprentices. One's had training, the other's in their training. And I like the fact it ended with a clear winner. And I guess we've got to talk about the things we'll see online. A lot of people kicking off that, once again, someone's been stabbed in Star Wars and has lived to tell the tale the next day. Poor old Qui-Gon Jinn, never made it past the 5-minute mark after that point. I will be completely honest, and my main criticism is actually this moment. I don't mind, the Reva one. She got stabbed twice in the stomach by Anakin / Darth Vader. That's fine. In this one, it's like we're going to show you the camera angle just so you know it's the side of the gut, so it's not a fatal wound. But we've got you some shock value. But there's no shock value because you've released episodes 1 and 2 back to back, so there's no cliffhanger for us to wait on for a week. Plus, all the trailers have with short hair, with just in with long hair. So I don't mean to come across like I'm moaning. I'm not. I just felt like because the choreography of the duel I really enjoyed, and in both episodes, we'll talk about episode 2 shortly. I really, really like the choreography, and we know Filoni is fantastic at that too. I just wish, maybe for my own sake, that we just didn't go down that route again. That we can have. Surely we could have had Sabine lose without a shock factor. Maybe that's just me being pedantic. I don't know, but I'm curious what you guys thought of the ending of the episode because I still love the fact she lost. And I love the fact that we've set up a rivalry now. We've got 2 sets of Master and Apprentices, which I think is going to come in across the next few weeks.
So, jumping back to the first point about the gap and the character growth, I actually think there's a good example of it, of Filoni doing it before, which is season 2, season 3 of Rebels, and Ezra. Ezra, obviously, you took Kanan back, lost against Vader and Maul, and then the next bit, I remember Dave and I sat in the screening. Funny enough, we were there for both introductions of Thrawn. But 2016 sat there. We watched the first 2 episodes of season 3 Rebels, and it's he now has a green lightsaber. He has his hair cut short, and he's just not a different character, but he's just grown in the whatever space it is. And it's assumed knowledge again of here's character growth, and here's time and space has happened. Done. And Filoni's done it again with this, but this is a gentler way of doing it. So I'm okay because I've seen it's been done before, but I actually trust Filoni with that process. Going to the duel itself, I agree with the most part, apart from with the shock factor. I think it's more because you need to see it happen in terms of someone has to win, someone has to lose. The fact that Sabine lost, I think, is a good thing, but also the shock factor, it wasn't a case of it was done for shock factor. It was more of a case of the proof that she is not as good as X. It's that case of when you have, and I'm jumping ahead a bit here, but Huan go, yeah, your abilities are lacking a hell of a lot behind everyone else I've seen. In the last 500 years of Chain Jedi, you are literally the back of the queue. You are useless. But you're still better than someone who hasn't done anything at all. It's that kind of level. And Sabine here is very much green, without having to harp about the lightsaber cut. It's very much kind of, here you go. You know where the character's at. It's setting it up for growth by also showing failure. So I quite like it. I agree with the fact that it loses a little bit of impact where you do have literally the next episode plus the rest of the season. But also where this is a season probably where it's a one and done. Maybe there's 2 seasons before we get to Heirs of the Empire. You need to get a little bit out of the way. So, yeah, on the whole, though, fantastic ending to the first episode. Fantastic setup for the second of what has been probably the best since Obi-Wan.
I thought the duel was fantastic. I thought it was very well choreographed. I thought it was very well put together, which I think having Filoni in charge really does ramp these things up, where he's going to sit there and go, this is the lightsaber duel, this is how it should go, this is how it should look, this is how heavy the lightsabers are to them, this is how much they have knowledge-wise of the Force, and exactly where they should be battling each other. And I thought it worked really well as just a set piece of these 2 learners and at their different levels. The stabbing of Sabine was probably almost unnecessary. I think it was partly to keep her out of the second episode as much as they needed not to have much to do. She was lying in a bed for the majority of it, playing with a robot head, which is what we do when we're in bed and well. But no, so I just thought, I get why they did it, but I think the fact that everyone was going to be like, as soon as that happened, like, oh, she's been stabbed now, and that's nothing happened to her either. I guess you would think she's in the capital citadel, then so was Qui-Gon, but must have been a worse stabby. Darth Maul must have shook it around a bit when he got inside. Made it really bad. We just didn't see that bit. But yeah, I mean, it was a through and through. It was, you could see when they finally revealed the wound, it was just a tiny, tiny, weeny mark on our side. So it was like, okay, I get why you've probably put it in there, but I don't think we needed that. Maybe it was for people who've not seen Rebels, to have a character who's appeared and has already been taken out maybe in the first episode. That, I thought it was going to be a main character, but then you're right, you get the second episode, you're like, oh, she's fine. So yeah, it just seemed a bit unnecessary. But the lightsaber itself, the lightsaber battle, I thought was really well done. I really liked it. I thought it was very, very well placed, and probably could have finished when Ahsoka turned up and she just ran off, because obviously she couldn't have taken on Ahsoka. She would have lost very heavily. But yeah, it worked for me.
Absolutely. We've just got a couple of comments I'm going to bring up. Madeline put, thank God they put the 2 episodes back to back. I wouldn't have handled after just finished Rebels.
Could you imagine people that binged Rebels and
got the cliffhanger?
Yeah.
And then we've also got the problem is not that people survive. Now the problem is that Qui-Gon had to die this way because we needed an emotional scene of Obi-Wan. It's humoristic. This is a good point. Maybe it was actually the uppercut to the jaw that did it for Qui-Gon, and we'll just never know. But hey, I'm glad what we've all said about the phone stuff because his influence on this film just felt unparalleled. And I know that's ridiculous because he's the showrunner to say, but this felt way more like Filoni than The Mandalorian ever has. I'm not there to try and divulge the Filoni-Favreau debate. I'm not involved in debates like that, but this is 100% Filoni Star Wars now, and that's how I feel where this is going. So I'm curious, very curious at what comes next. And obviously we know that part 2 comes next. So we start talking about part 2. It's a shorter episode, which is great. We had a great first episode. Kickstarting with the recovery. No, let's find her in peril. Straight in, next day, hospital, this happens. And I guess where we're going to start to get into this is you're starting to get the character development now of what happened in the gaps between with Ahsoka, with Sabine, where things had gone wrong for the pair of them. And I'll say that Maelys Winstead really gets to come into her own in this episode, that she is playing that mother figure that we have seen in Star Wars Rebels. She's playing the mother figure that we know she has come across. And how do you jump that into live action? Ironically, we don't get to see her son. Maybe he'll rock up at some point in the future. That's the big debate. I know there's a Lego set of the Ghost they're all talking about, if you guys have heard about this. But I've got to say, the second episodes, I mean, I've jumped ahead talking to hospital. If you want to talk about the opening with the villains again, another prologue featuring the villains where they're setting the map up, that we get the revelation that, dearie me, I've forgotten her name already. Morgan Elsbeth is actually one of the last surviving Night Sisters. Loved it. If you didn't know what a Night Sister was, they're not rubbing it in your face. It's just another name of a Star Wars species. If you do know, great. It's just added knowledge for you. And I love this opening that we're getting more and more of not the villain plans, but Ray Stevenson playing Baylan in this. And this is what I really enjoyed him. The Star Wars TV shows have had an issue sometimes with anyone that's not the lead villain in the sense of they've not been able to be developed as supporting characters. Baylan Skoll in this episode is very layered to the point people are already talking about there's good in him sort of stuff because he has a great conversation with Elsbeth across the episodes, especially towards the end as well. But I love the opening that he is aware of what a Night Sister is, and you can see he's sort of cautious around her when she is doing, the witchcraft and stuff. And I also love as well that with Shin Hati, I'm going to learn their names by the end of next week. I hope so. She just doesn't have a clue. Like, is she a witch? Is she a this? And I like that what Star Wars has done, I guess, with the Night Sisters post-Clone Wars, and Fallen Order again's done a really good job of this. They're not just generalized as being bold witches who are very pale that can do magic. Like, they can actually develop them, that they can come across as not normal, because that sounds like racist against a fictional species. But I like the fact that Morgan Elsbeth just isn't this person that was in The Mandalorian, and that's it. Nothing else. There's stuff going on with her. Her family has a legacy. She had, ample amount of money and power. And I like the fact that episode 2 really feels like, okay, we are building for Thrawn now. That they told us in the crawl he has loyal followers. Now we're seeing it aside from this one person. And, don't bring politics into Star Wars, they say. The film called Star Wars that was always political. I really liked what they've done with this. And I think there's a lot to read in between characters and the performances, the not facial expressions, but just the way the dialogue's been written, which we know that Filoni's good at doing. We've seen him do that with animated stuff. And just talking part 2 quickly before I pass over to you guys about your thoughts on the opening. Steph Green's direction was superb in this episode. She's worked on, I think she did one episode of the Book of Boba Fett or 2. She's been involved in a fair amount of TV. I thought this was amazing. I actually thought Filoni directed episode 2 until the credits at the end rolled.
Yeah, no, she's done a fantastic job on these ones, and I agree. I actually thought it was Filoni until the credits rolled myself. No, the map part of that, and I love the conversation, but seeing also the magic finally on screen, like in live action, it's one thing seeing it in Clone Wars and seeing it in game, but seeing magic as in the green flame, the actual incantations, that kind of stuff. We've seen it in drips and drabs, like, and it's great on screen in an animated form, but you wonder how they would do it. It's subtle, it's small, but it's really well done. And yeah, that dialogue of who is this person really? Oh, Survivor or the Night Sisters again. It was a cool little nod, and I didn't know. Again, so there's little information for those, even for those the hardcore followers. You still get new information, but again, it's not rammed down your throat. It's all these little pieces adding up. Yeah, and then to go back to it in terms of Hera again knocking out the park in the opening here. She's doing what Hera did in Rebels. It's the space mum role of I look after everybody else because no one else looks after me. Role of I have you all. That's what I need. You're doing what you're doing. And even with someone as well respected and loved as Ahsoka is in universe, not just in as a fandom, in universe, we know Fulcrum. Again, using the Fulcrum word coming back again was really cool. But for Hera to go, you two are very alike, as in you're both stubborn. Do what you need to, very subtly, and it's so well done. But yeah, no, it's fantastic. And as you said, George, it's Dave Filoni doing what he does best, dialogue, which is one thing that George Lucas couldn't do well. So he's trained him up well. Here we go, best of both worlds, and yeah, loved every second.
I thought the opening was great. I think what it did for me more is it just shows me how big Bill and a character is going to be, and I think he could come out of this as this huge character, which will be sorely missed. Now, unfortunately, with obviously Rhys Stevenson passing, is going to be a big loss. To obviously, they finished shooting, so how his story ends by episode 8, we don't know yet. If that's going to have a finality to it, or if it'll be something that they maybe thought was going to come back, and we'll have to Cara Dune him somewhere. I don't know how that'll work, but his this presence on screen, the fact he's a former Jedi, that they knew he was brought up in the temple, that he has when they're talking about the path between the two galaxies. That was a story they told as like younglings to each other about this path through the stars, and it was just a legend thing that was just like a fairy story to them. I thought it was just so really well that he's obviously training Hattie as sorry,
his apprentice.
Yeah, so
Shin Hattie, yeah.
Shin Hattie, sorry, yeah. Sorry, I like the name. But yeah, that he's training her like he would have trained a Padawan, like he was trained, like
she's even got the Padawan braid.
The Padawan braid, and he's like training her like he was brought up with the Jedi, but obviously doing things a little differently, and whether they're mercenaries or whichever way they're working to not be quite dark side, not light side, we don't know yet. But I just thought the opening for them was really, really strong. I loved the Night Sister mention. I liked seeing how the magic was working. It was just so simple and subtle. There wasn't like massive waves of green cloud everywhere or anything like that. It was really just a green flame. That's all you really need to see about it. But yeah, I thought the opening was excellent for this episode again and really stood out.
Yeah, and I think that's what, again, is interesting for me is that with Star Wars, when you are on telly, when you are making the jump, how would you go from live action to TV? Sorry, how do you go from film to TV? You can't. You have time. And with that time, you need to develop characters. It shouldn't just be extended action set pieces. It shouldn't just be extra things. It should be developing these people. And the one thing Filoni's done an incredible job of, going back to Clone Wars, is not just developing light side characters, developing supporting characters. He's gone to villains. He's gone to henchmen, and he's given them backstories. He's developed them so much further. And I felt like we've had this with these two immediately off this. And again, with Morgan Elsbeth, played by Diana Leon Stato, it's great that we've been able to keep it, because I did wonder what purpose will she serve for this, and not to make comments that sort of it's a very done and dusted trope in so many franchises, the history of cinema. The devoted supporter looking to bring back their person they've worshipped. I mean, Indiana Jones kind of did it in the new one in a different way, and I like the fact that they're all working on this goal, but they're all there to serve Thrawn, and that is building him up as a villain so much more, that everyone's working to bring back this guy. They're not cutting to him in a credit sequence, him bored alone on a planet waiting to be rescued. I love the fact that there is this unknown quantity about him. And I've just got to quickly bring this comment. I had to Google, but I'm intrigued. I like that she called herself a survivor after reading the backstory. That's, of course, about Elspeth as well. And they didn't need to chuck that in at Mandalorian. I bet it was probably planned at that point. I bet there was ideas. I bet that's when they knew they were going to do an Ahsoka series. But it's great they've been able to give her a role in this. And I know that with the actress, her history, she's done so many martial arts stuff as well. I think she's done a lot of stunt choreography. I would want to double check that. But it's interesting that she's playing this prevalent role, at least until we meet Thrawn. Which makes it so much more exciting, and it's really lending itself to TV. That should this be a TV show? That's always the question, right? Should Ahsoka be a series or a film? Right now, they have justified it being a series because they're diving into it in the way that TV should be done, rather than just having an extended film be 8 hours. It feels like it's a series by trade, and they keep calling it a limited series. So I do wonder if they are being deadly serious about this being a one and done miniseries, which wouldn't surprise me. Really wouldn't surprise me at this point. But if we keep talking with some of the stuff, let's talk some of the good guys though. Is it a bit soon to jump to the shipyard, or do we want to talk the hospital? Because they're sort of combined into one and two together, as far as I'm concerned. But sticking with what happens with Hera, with Sabine, and of course Ahsoka, the trip to the shipyard. I loved all the hospital stuff. Yeah, again, it's great scenes with Huyang. Again, the fact they got Tennant back. I know it's a voice work. But it's these little things that add to it. And you know what? And I'll just say it. There'll be people that watch the show because they find out David Tennant's in it. I guarantee you this. There'll be like insane Whovians or whatever. Yeah. There'll be people that are watching this for Tennant, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. And I like the fact that it's not a cameo, that he's actually, he is part of the crew. He is the droid for them. And he's had more screen time than Chopper so far. It's something where his character lends itself to Ahsoka. When they announced he was coming back at Celebration, it was this kind of like, makes sense, but why? And what we've been able to get from him in 2 episodes isn't just the wisdom and his history with the Jedi. It's these little life lesson things he's teaching. And when he gives Sabine the drilling down, essentially of, you're terrible, but you could be good. Or when he's talking to Ahsoka, he's like, you need an apprentice. I'm not trained to do this. It's against my programming. You need to have an apprentice because my job is to teach Jedi. And what I loved is the lightsaber stuff, when he's able to identify the Jedi off the lightsaber, off how it was built and who did the modifications. And it's a really interesting way. I think this series is going to explore something that Star Wars hasn't done too much of. I know that Kenobi has the path. I know that stemmed into Fallen Order, which was great. But off this one conversation at the end with Baylan, and he goes, it'd be a shame to kill Ahsoka. There's not many Jedi left. That tells you everything you need to know about what his real inner conflict is, but also the state of the galaxy. And Star Wars hasn't really been able to explore the Jedi point of view on Order 66, aside from Luke Skywalker, that there is a chosen one. We've got to protect Luke, that we need a new Jedi Order. We've never really been able to look at the individuals for themselves. It's always been the collective. We look at the Jedi as an entity and how do we bring them back, not what happened to the people that were Jedi. And I think Filoni's going to be the one that really does a good job at developing this further. And I think it's just something we haven't seen with Star Wars. And I understand why not, because, post 66, you think every Jedi's died except, 2. And I know that some people think it should have been that, and I'm fine with that. But I've always liked the idea that there were more. And I actually think George Lucas has gone on record on one of the Taschen books to say that actually there were a couple of scattered dozen, or I can't remember, it was a couple of hundred Jedi left. The implication was that the point of the Jedi was that there were thousands and thousands and thousands, and now there's basically nothing. So of course it would make sense for one to pop up. And even in time, we then get an Inquisitor post original trilogy, who we're going to probably find out more about. I don't know if there's people theorizing already. I'm sure there will be, but sorry if I'm waffling off tangent. What are your thoughts on the Jedi stuff?
I mean, the Jedi stuff for me, as you guys well know, is kind of what I'm passionate about when it comes to Star Wars. And we talk about it like next year. I'm going to be here waxing lyrical for a long time about them. But Huyang, as you said, George, as we were talking about before we came on air, I loved how he wasn't just a cameo. He's an integral part of the story, but also without being an integral part of the story. When he talks about the protocols, of course I wasn't here. This is not my job. I help you, but no, you need an apprentice to do this part. And when he's talking to Sabine, gives the drilling down, goes, you are useless, but you have potential. But it's the whole, this is your lightsaber. She goes, no, this is Ezra's. He goes, well, Ezra built it. You modified it. You willed it. It's yours. His logic is sound and it's brilliantly well done. And it's Filoni setting things up as Filoni does best. And again, going on to then Balin, who I agree with what Dave said earlier. It's even sadder now as a fan watching this going, I don't know how this arc is going to end. And unfortunately, we won't get to see more of it because I'm already enthralled, already going, yep, this is one of the best parts of the show because he is such a complicated character. And you found this out in 2 episodes. He has such depth and it's been played so well. It's like, okay, this is going to be a part that's missed. Not only a great actor and on all accounts, a therapist as well for his charity work on the bits and pieces he's done. This is then more obviously the story. But no, I think, we jumped ahead to the shipyard and also talking about Chop. Well, we'll get on to Chop in a bit, but I mean, seeing Huang not be a cameo, see a proper character, seeing the interactions with Sabine, again, Sabine limited in episode 2, she needs to be, this is Star Wars and Rebels, Clone Wars, whatever you want to call it, however you want to see it, this is it done right. And it's done, so right.
It's lovely that I think you were saying just about Tennant bringing people who want to see Tennant in things, and I think that will be a big part. Like you bring it right back to what you said originally, like general audience members who are going to come into this who aren't going to be the dedicated people like ourselves who are always going to watch Ahsoka. Yeah. It is going to bring in other eyes to these series, which I think is a great thing. For his character to be in a couple of episodes, one episode mainly of the Clone Wars, giving out the kids their lightsabers, to then having that bit of knowledge to how it's been made, and his discussion with him kind of coaxing Ahsoka and Sabine together is really well played. I thought it's just a really nice moment between them. I just think the whole thing is leading up to that. They had to get through the hospital stuff fairly quickly because that was obviously the shipyard is the main crux of the episode to get to our big circular thing that we're building at the end. Star Wars trope, circle thing getting built in space. So no, it was really nice. And to then find out you're going back to Corellia after the last time we were there was in Han Solo, in Solo, a Star Wars Story, was really nice as well. A nice little rounding out of that when they open the droid's head, that's where it's being built, and you kind of know where you're going from there.
Yeah, and the Corellia stuff's great because again, it's not here's a reference. It's a planet that exists and it just happens to have been used before. And if you're looking for an Imperial shipyard, why not? We know that's where they were built, and this is where it gets interesting with this episode that we start getting the politics of it, right? That okay, so she's owned factories, they're there, and I love the dismissive talk that these guys aren't loyal to the Empire, not loyal to them, they're loyal to whoever's paying them, and we kind of know what's going to happen, right? You've got droids that have been found there. You've got dodgy business things going on. I liked the shipyard scene. I was very worried
I
for
think
a brief
your
minute.
microphone's kind of making a noise.
Has it gone electronical? Talk. You guys talk about that, and I'll be back in a sec.
So yeah, I think where George was going, I think the stuff on Corellia was lovely to get to. Having the last time that we saw it in Solo, where it was this dark, barely could see anything, all overcast, rainy. It was really nice to get to this bright version of it. I thought it was really nice to see Corellia that has moved on and moved forward from technically from underneath Imperial reign. We find out that's not really the case, but I thought it was really nice to kind of go back to somewhere that we've known, somewhere that is very well known within the Star Wars universe as well, but get to see it in literally in a new light.
Yeah, it's cool also to go back to a planet we've known that isn't Tatooine. Because I am.
Could have been, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could have been. It's like, right, back to Tatooine we go. Here we go, boys. This is Star Wars. Therefore, Tatooine it is. No, it was nice to go back to something different. But on top of that, though, I love the whole scene between the shipyard owner and Hera of the. It's classified. Yeah, not to
I'm
me.
A general.
I'm a general.
Classified. Yeah,
it's classified. All right. Things aren't here, and then of course for the Empire, it's like, oh, okay, here we go. But it makes sense because of course as he's going through, the guy's playing politics. I'm loyal to my investors. The whole thing is like, well, yeah, how the hell did you expect the New Republic to build ships when you can't go through every single personnel? You can't go through, fire everyone that was pro-imperial, find new employees, build droids to replace them. Again, that's not something that takes place overnight. You've got to put a lot into it. But again, what I love though is just the droid going, oh yeah, that's an HK assassin droid. In fact, there you go, leave it there. There you go, have fun. Before you get to the insanity that is then Chopper coming back to our screens now, I mean, for me especially, this was, if the opening crawl felt Star Wars, Chopper makes it feel Rebels. It's that kind of level of, it's the whole him digging through things, getting frustrated, throwing the track and just be like flexing. He's like, it's this is what we've waited for.
Is
the microphone okay?
Yeah, you're back and sounding wonderful. I just think it was a really nice touch as well in inside of Corellia, inside of the shipyards, where they were like, are you okay with having all these staff? Have you got new members of staff? No, you can't just build a new republic in a day. These people work for the Empire. And I think, just like DJ said in Last Jedi, where it's like, look, the people who are making these weapons or the people who are building these weapons, doesn't good or bad, they're both in it for themselves, and they're all, the money's going to the same sort of people for the ships and things like that. So it was still that sort of little nod to like, you can't just, these aren't just fresh people. You're going to have these people. And of course, there are going to be people who were still loyal to an empire that was only, let's say 7-8 years since the destruction of Death Star 2. So it was lovely to get that sort of look at like, we've still got people who are absolutely thinking about the empire and what they're trying to do, and obviously know a little bit like behind the scenes of what's going on. I love this SSD, Superstar Destroyer engine being used, and I just thought it was a really nice way to show that yes, this is stuff going on, but this New Republic think they are cozy and have taken their eye already off the ball. The First Order is starting because people aren't paying attention like this to what's going on with things like the Corellia. I think it was did you check to make sure that this nothing's happening on Corellia? Like, we'll go and have a look now. They're already letting the First Order happen, and they have no idea that's what's happening.
And I think as well that kind of comes in, if that is not to me to go back to that crawl again because I love it, but it's that whole like, again, Thrawn supporters are trying to get him. Like, these are, if they're in the Empire, they all knew who Thrawn was. They're probably thinking that they'd have, we know they probably would have won this fictional war if he was around during those years. And it is very interesting that we are really building up to this, and it feels like, why are they all working seriously? Like, what does this guy need? And I just love the idea that they were building this monstrosity machine to get to this other galaxy. Is it 9 hyperdrives they say they've had to have installed into it? And that's the big interest of where it's going to go from here, is that, we know we've got the tracker on and they're waiting for the update. But I just love the fact that something is going to, for anyone curious, we saw the first episodes on Monday. I believe some press was showing the first 3 on screeners. I do not know anybody that has seen the first 3. I know a lot that were sent the first 2. So that's more of an urban myth in group chats that 3 episodes have been sent out. But the runtime is confirmed at 30 minutes for episode 3. Okay. That much is true. And I feel that episode 3 is going to be this big jump in the narrative where we're probably going to get them arriving to this location. And I just love how it's all been built up so far. And the shipyard stuff was great because you need that contextuality of this is where they are within the timeline. That it's so soon after. It's, no different to comparing it to like modern wars and whatnot, where there are always loyal supporters after, losers on the opposing ends of war and whatnot. Not to state the obvious and get boring, but who's the most famous loser of World War One? Hitler. He started World War Two. It's not fucking hard. Like, there's real life everywhere, and it's one of them where I like where this show is building towards. Bavaria, as a German, I somehow saw the reality of this, but it showed that you can't think everyone has good intentions or let go of what they believed in the past for a long time. 100%. Just look at those weirdos that have Confederate flags in America, and none of them are alive. And when that happened 200 years ago, whatever it was. But sort of sticking back with this, sorry, I've lost my lost mini schedule. Let's sort of jump to the ending. So things are being set up now, and Sabine has cut the hair. She's gone full apprentice, no braid. Great theory online. Some people are wondering, is it the same blade that Kanan used to cut his hair? Have you heard about this?
I thought that the first time I watched it, but I still think it's just a Mandalorian vibro blade. I think it's just hers. But when she first sat down onto her knees, I thought it was Kanan's.
Yeah, I'm very much the camp that's Kanan's. I think she kept it along with a lot of other things. Because if you look at the background of what was Ezra's old place, you see the helmet she painted for Kanan. Yeah.
I know it's a knife, and listen, Star Wars fans will debate everything, but I just saw it online earlier. I was like, it's worth bringing up.
It's
I've not
Filoni,
rewatched Rebels recently.
Dumb.
But I do like the fact how the episode ended, fully in the Mandalorian armor once more. She is back on track. It is the end of the epilogue from Star Wars Rebels now. I know Ahsoka's not in the full white gown, but Sabine's there. She's in the costume. She's got the clothes. They're waiting. They're going on their adventure. They've even got shots of her walking out the same buildings on Lothal. Also, we haven't mentioned Lothal. The production design looked unbelievable on that. And I was so relieved it didn't look like Coruscant in a way. It felt like a new planet. That, again, when they made Lothal back in... Rebels came out in 2014, right? So they're producing it from like probably 2012, 13 as soon as Disney took over. To get to that production design, that was no intention of being live action back then. And here we are 10 years later with it in live action now. I just thought it looked immense.
It felt like Lothal. Like, that's the thing, though. Like, especially when you had the whole...
like a new planet.
It's that... The biggest comparison is actually when you have that epilogue with Ahsoka arrive with the two X-Wings. It looks how it feels. And again, going along with the E-Wing, which was cool to have the E-Wing in canon, but the streets with the lamps, the Lothcats pop up here and there, like everything felt Lothal. I mean, yes, it's Filoni doing it, so yes, he's going to take care of it. But also from a animation to live action perspective, what better set design can you have than something that's been lovingly created over that period of time in animation to go, here you go, here's your blueprint. This is how it should look.
Yeah, 100%. I just thought it'd be worth bringing up because we'd forgot to. I hadn't written it down. But that's wrapping up end of episode 2. And listen, we've gone almost an hour and a half. It's weird doing this because we're 2 episodes in out of 8. There's going to be a lot more of these spoiler discussions, and I think because it's the first time we've had a sense of not knowing where it's going to go, and not to dismiss the Mandalorian. Right, Andor is a prequel series. We know the ending of Andor, Rogue One. We know we've had the sequel trilogy, and The Mandalorian was this episodic. When we've been doing Mandalorian over the last few years, we weren't at the beginning. We were midway to the end of the journey, assuming this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. For the first time, I feel like we're in this new, not vibe of Star Wars, but I don't know where it's going to go. I know we've kind of, yes, Thrawn's going to come back. They're going to maybe find Ezra, maybe not, maybe search for him. They're going to get a film at some point. I don't know what's going to happen in the coming weeks. And that's what's really exciting. I'm not here to sit there and speculate, but I'm so glad we didn't get Thrawn in the first 2 episodes. It was never going to be in this early. My wild theory is we're actually going to get Ezra till, like, if we're lucky, the last episode. That's generally how I feel about that case. But the stuff with Thrawn, it's so exciting for me because, again, I think I read half of the Thrawn book that came out after Rebels, the first one. I know there's been like 2 trilogies now, which is insane. In a good way, that characters come back, had been a bit stolen an animated series, made it his own. Then he got 6 books, and now he's in live action, and he's going to be the villain in the film probably. We're getting Lars Mikkelsen back, and when the time comes, I just think there's going to be a moment, and we haven't mentioned Kevin Kiner too much. The score has made this show so far. I mentioned the opening crawl has been my favorite thing. The score, I think, is carrying the show. I'm not saying that anything else is bad. I'm just saying that Kevin Kiner's finally got the chance to do live-action Star Wars. He began Ahsoka's journey. Ludwig Göransson was speaking to him when Ahsoka was in The Mandalorian about the themes. He was absolutely the right person for Filoni to bring on board. I'm happy that the studio allowed it. I'm sure it's the sort of thing they could probably veto if they wanted to, but they didn't, with very good reason. And when they mention his name and you get the first hint at the Thrawn thing, that got me very excited. So I'm not going to ask for your wild predictions for episode 3, but I'm just going to ask you both, what do you want to see in the coming weeks? Just very briefly, is a nice way to outro.
So to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, I've actually been listening to the Thrawn books. I have listened to everything, also all 6, literally on the last book of the second trilogy, which is Lesser Evil, which is the prequel trilogy. So you've got the first 3 books are set in conjunction with Rebels, and you got bits that are set in conjunction with Clone Wars as well. Both trilogies, they are fantastic books. But again, Dave and I were in the room when they introduced Thrawn for Rebels. Here we are again, come back for more. And yeah, he has made it his own in that wonderful way, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it. But I agree. I don't think we'll see Thrawn until episode 4. We might see him next week. I doubt it. I think it'll be episode 4, halfway through. Here is your right. Set up what they're doing. Next week will be the journey to. Then it'll be Thrawn. Then we how to get him back. As the Empire will be obviously the culmination of this. I think Ezra, you will see in episode 8. I think he'll play that. He will play the sacrificial role in As the Empire to keep Thrawn away again.
Oh, that's going to be Ahsoka. No, Ahsoka's going to
It was something along those lines. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be that, like, yes, the Empire is where it's all leading up to, but in this series, next week, I think it's the right. They are, as they said before, so we are now behind. They have the map. We don't. They have, obviously, the locations they can go, so they're playing catch-up. That's where we're going to be for the next week, is that, okay, they are ahead of us. How do we now get to this?
Yeah, I've just all my thoughts are that we're going to see that huge Jedi starship ring, the hyperspace ring, get powered up, because that's literally what its design is. Literally a giant Jedi hyperspace ring. I do think they're going to start their journey towards the new universe, or the new galaxy, sorry, that they're going to. So whether they arrive at that destination or we get them just en route, because I'm guessing that's not going to be a straightforward jump. Like that's a distance for them to go. So it'd be very interesting to see what that traveling is look like. If it's normal hyperspace, if that's something different because of the way they showed the line and why there's all these stories behind it. And then, yeah, I think we very much at the point of the rebels deciding how they're also going to make that journey or find out where the first point of that journey is going to be. So, in fair point, I have no idea where it's going to go, but that'll be my first thought of what we might see.
No, I'm with you on that, and that's what kind of makes it exciting. It isn't a slam dunk as some of the other shows have been, and what we think is going to go. And kind of with that, just my final thoughts on the first 2 episodes is I thought it was a solid start. I can't say anything more or less than that. They've brought back some characters we've spent years with. People probably worried about them. Can they do it in live action? They absolutely can. And it's got to be full credit to Filoni. And listen, I'm just going to kind of round up my final thoughts, just saying that, you know, it's a reason why everyone's always said it's going to be him. And if this show can stick the landing, because the key is it's, you know, we're a quarter of the way in, you know, there's a long way to go. If they can stick the landing that's been started, then they will quite comfortably, arguably, have the best Star Wars series after Andor. That's technically halfway through, isn't it? Because it's got a season 2 to come. But it's exciting times. It's exciting times. I'm glad we got Star Wars back. And even looking into next year, there's some insane different shows in production. Poor Skeleton Crew. No one's been talking about that. That's my final thoughts. Dave Filoni, he is the chosen one, said a dying Qui-Gon Jinn after he was the one Jedi not to survive being impaled.
He had some underlying conditions. That was all. It was.
Yep.
He just wanted to go. It predicted the future.
It was ready.
Yep.
It predicts the future because this kid's going to end it all. I'm going to get out while I can.
Yep.
Should never brought him on board.
Phil, final thoughts before we round out.
Not much more to say apart from the fact that this was worth the wait. Generally, this was worth the wait.
And I can only follow that with, it was worth being up early hours of the morning for. Maybe not next week when I'm back at work, but certainly for catching those first 2 episodes. I loved this. I thought it's played perfectly for someone who has spent the time. I went through all 4 seasons of Rebels in the lead up to this show, so it was really nice, kind of that run straight into this series as well. So I can't wait for next week.
Absolutely. And listen, that's what we're all excited for. And this will be back next week. So as always, if you're watching live, thank you for those that have been commenting all evening with us. If you've been watching it later on, thank you. If you do want to leave a comment, we will reply to those. So do let us know your thoughts on Ahsoka. If you like the video, maybe share it, maybe send it to other people's way if they're interested in this. And if you do like this video, hit the subscribe button. There's a lot more Star Wars stuff coming on the way. We're going to be doing these every Wednesday nights. We've also got the Dave and Phill retrospective starting next Monday. We've recorded our Alien 3 review. Alien 3, yes, and Sevens tomorrow. But we've got a few things. We've got a home media series starting up on the channel. Lovely timing for Disney to finally announce that we're going to get some of these shows on 4K. You know, physical media will always triumph, unlike streaming services. So that's a great little announcement. I think Mando season 1 and 2 is out December the 12th. So we'll get it UK a similar time, I believe. Pre-orders are going to open on Monday. But aside from that, find out about other videos, other announcements, you're best off getting us on social media. Linktree.com/cinemasavvy. It's got a link to everywhere where we'll be. Whatever social media platforms you use, you can find us on there. But as always, thank you both for joining us. It's always a privilege to get you both on. Lovely to get you both back on as well. Martin, thanking us. Thank you for tuning in as always. And to everybody else, take care, and we'll see you on the next one.